Welcome to our live panel. Today we'll be talking about new standards in occupant experience and how technology is solving the needs of modern employees. So as a reminder, this session will be available on demand. Within the next 48 hours, you should receive the recording via email. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the chat tab at the bottom of your player. We'll be answering some of your questions at the end of the session. So without any further ado, I'll now go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. My name is Aneta Turkot, and I'm the Product Marketing Director at Kontakt.io, and I'll be today's panel moderator. And I'm very excited to introduce to you our digital building experts. Please meet Sam Biggerstaff, who leads the digital building market in the UK, and Adrian Wagant, who leads the US market. Sam, Adrian, please tell us where you're calling us from today and what's your role at Kontakt.io. Sam, do you want to start? Sam, you're on mute.
Of course I am. But thanks for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you may be. I'm Sam Biggerstaff. I am focused on the enterprise end user sales for Kontakt.io across EMEA. I'm based just outside of London in the UK. Previously, I've spent many years focused on this within the smart building industry, but with a sort of a predominant focus on sort of the machine element of smart buildings. So very much focused now on humanizing buildings and improving that employee experience. Thanks, Aneta.
Okay, and my name is Adrian Wagant. I'm based out of New Hampshire, so just 45 minutes north of Boston. And I've been working in the smart building field for a long time now. I'm responsible for everything smart building here in the US. And that ranges from the sales aspect to data collection, technology, and product development.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam and Adrian. Great to have you here today. To start off our conversation, I believe it's worth defining first what the occupant experience is, as it may vary for various people leading different roles within an organization. And the definition probably has changed after COVID. So we can see there are employers and employees joining us today. So Adrian, let's set the baseline and define what do we mean when we're discussing occupant experience.
Well, the occupancy experience itself is pretty much about how people experience their environment. So it's safety, comfort, productivity, appreciation. So it's, do you feel comfortable in your workplace? Do you have the right type of workplace to feel and be productive? Do you feel safe at work? And in our case, we're talking about employees. So occupant experience is pretty much the same as a workplace experience. But at this point, it's also worth mentioning, why occupant experience has become a big topic recently, because it's been around for a long time. And the roots of that, started pre-COVID, when companies were just optimizing their space to cut down on real estate costs by jamming more and more people into a smaller and smaller amount of space. And that required a transition from a static workplace concept where everyone has their assigned seats to an agile environment with hot desking and hoteling. But obviously, when COVID started with the pandemic, everything changed, because trying to jam as many people into as small of a space as possible was not very desirable at that point in time. And, the way people work has also changed, because that was pretty much the start of the hybrid workforce, remote working. And, with the current situation here in the US, we have a tight labor market. It's also changed where the power is in terms of employee versus employer. And so now, with employees potentially coming back to the office, it's more important than ever to determine how space is being used, so that you can make an adjustment based on how your office is being used correctly. And you really only have one chance to get that wrong, because if your employees are coming back into the office and they find out there's not enough space, or the office is completely empty when they come in, they're not going to be incentivized to come into the office. And it's become a very big topic, because there's a huge amount of potential savings that you can have if you adjust your real estate portfolio to the correct way your employees are using their work. An example being KPMG on Tuesday announced that they're shrinking their New York office space by over 40%. So you can imagine how big of an impact that is. So you really need to have the technology to facilitate that, and you need to make sure that your occupant experience is a positive one, so employees, do actually come and show up to the office.
Sam, from your perspective, what are some of the elements that may impact or define the occupant experience?
Yeah, I think very well described by Adrian there from a occupant experience perspective. But I also think that it's made up, like, you can influence that experience through three main elements. You have the social element, which is the interaction employees have with others within their work setting. You have the work element, interactions employees have with their assigned tasks. And the physical element is the interaction employees have with the tangible environment around them. And if we can all of those three, and we can influence all of those three, will improve or increase the employee experience. An example would be tools and technology. They're going to be able to help influence both the physical environment and also the sort of the work element, i.e. how individuals are able to tackle their assigned tasks. So yeah, overall, I think if we focus on those three elements there, you can certainly start to impact and improve an employee's experience.
So Sam, you mentioned three elements that might impact the occupant experience: social, work, and physical. Mm-hmm. And finding the right balance between these three will create a perfect work setting, right? So with the current return to office movement, we know that not every company has mastered or found the balance between those elements. And so there are various challenges that they need to overcome. Sam, Adrian, you talk to our customers daily. What are some of the common challenges you hear? Maybe we'll look from two different perspectives, employees and employers. Sam, can you give us the employee's perspective?
Yes. So I guess from an employee's perspective, and I know we don't like to keep talking about it, but we have just come out of a global pandemic, and lots of businesses are looking to move to more of a hybrid working environment. But in order to get people back into the office and improve that employee experience, number one is we need to make employees feel safe and secure within their environment. So I think that's one challenge that businesses are facing at the moment. Being able to show to their employees that they have developed and they have created sort of an environment that is safe for them to return to. I also think that the physical workspace is not necessarily designed as it stands for lots of businesses for more of a hybrid working environment. There's high levels of concentration spaces, whereas we're starting to work more collaboratively in a hybrid working environment. So that's another challenge that businesses will face in order to focus on that employee experience. And also, I think overall, I don't feel that there's the right tools and technology in place at this moment in time in order to be able to generate the data to improve that employee experience. So focusing on that data, and there's also an abundance of choice with the different types of technology that are out there. So you have LoRaWAN, you have Zigbee, you have Bluetooth Low Energy, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. So I think that's certainly a challenge, and that's something that needs to be assessed by businesses before sort of deploying. And I think maybe to mention last, but probably most importantly, is that the adoption of the technology is a big challenge for businesses, because you can come with the latest and greatest technologies and you can implement it into your real estate, but if your employees aren't adopting it and they aren't using it, then you're not getting the maximum value out of it. So that's a big area of focus, especially for us as a business in Kontakt.io. When we support our clients, we take that approach to really help manage the delivery of this technology into their businesses. Adrian, perhaps you could probably cover off from an employer's perspective, as that was very employee focused, I guess.
Well, I think from an employer's perspective, it's very similar, just looking at it from the other side. I'd probably say the three biggest problems are security, productivity, and churn. I mean, there's countless others, but those are probably the most important just because of the impact they have on a business. So, security being the first one, with people working remotely or on the road, coming into the office every once in a while, it's a lot harder for companies to keep track of what is being said, sensitive data, how the company is being represented. And that's a real serious issue. I mean, if you're working at home, you don't know whether you have all those security stuff in place, especially if you're discussing sensitive client information. One of the bigger problems that you also have with this whole new way of working is, do you have, as Sam said, enough collaborative space in your office for employees who are coming in? Because some studies have shown that if you don't have the meeting room or the space that you need in your office to actually have those sensitive conversations with clients, the first place that people tend to turn to is a coffee shop like Starbucks. And you really don't want your employees talking about sensitive data out in public. So trying to get a handle on that is very, very difficult. And the easiest way is obviously to get employees to come back to the office where everything is under control. The next point, productivity, is obviously the biggest one, generating kind of an ROI impact. It's how productive are employees? When the whole kind of pandemic started and people started working more and more remotely, initially there were reports saying that people were more productive working from home. And a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that employees wanted to show that they're actually working really hard and they were just working a lot more than they used to. But that has slowed down quite significantly, and most companies are trying to get their employees back into the office to maintain a high level of productivity. There's more that comes into that. You obviously have the issue of knowledge transfer being very, very difficult once people are working remotely. You can't have somebody just following you around all day and learning. So when you bring new employees in, it takes a lot longer for them to ramp up in terms of productivity. And with people coming back into the office, you have the issue of them coming for different reasons. If you show up in the office for collaboration purposes and nobody is there and the office is entirely empty, you're not going to be coming back into the office. You really have one chance to get it wrong. Whereas if you're trying to come in and concentrate and your entire workplace is just collaboration spaces, that's not ideal either. And every employee is different in terms of what their motivation is as to why they're coming back into the office. It could be, parents running away from screaming children and all they need is a place to concentrate where it's quiet. Or it could be, the more social employees who want to have that serendipitous collision with their colleagues and really need to have those social interactions for their job to be successful. And so getting a good feel for what the mix is in your company, and that obviously changes over time, is very important. So you need, the data collection, the technology in your building to monitor how the space is being used so you can make those adjustments. And lastly, I think a big one, especially for everyone on the call here, is employee churn. There's a lot of new buzzwords out right now about silent resignation, quiet quitting, employee disengagement. Having spent a lot of time working from home or working remotely, a lot of employees have become detached from the social fabric or the corporate culture of their company. And so it's a lot easier for them to then send out applications to other companies or just coast along or work minimally. And so again, you need to engage your employees. You need to give them a good place to work. You need to make them feel appreciated. And all of that is, a direct consequence of your workplace. Is it a welcoming one? Do you have a nice corporate culture? And that's where the whole employee experience becomes very, very relevant. So that would be kind of my take on the three biggest issues.
So moving from those challenges, we know that there is a technology out there who is helping to overcome or support companies to overcome the challenges. Over the past couple of years, the technology, and especially sensor technology, has evolved from standard intrusive cameras to privacy-first thermal cameras. Adrian, let's spend a little bit of a time and talk about human-centric digital building technologies and how can they be the answer, and where Kontakt.io stands there.
Well, smart building technologies come quite a ways in the last few years. Initially it was all about trying to find out how can we optimize our space, how can we get the biggest bang for our buck per square foot. And the beginnings in our field were just passive infrared sensors, the same ones that trigger the lights in the bathroom on off based on occupancy, that you would just put under every desk. They weren't very accurate. They were very intrusive. So I remember many cases where clients would come up, or employees would come up and say, "What's that thing between my legs pointing into the nether regions? I don't like that." And then, obviously it kind of developed further and further with accelerometers in the chairs. And then it went on to optical head count sensors on the ceiling, which are very accurate. They're very good sensors, but they bring in a whole new issue of, you have a video feed, you have images. So that makes the employees feel like they themselves are being tracked instead of the space usage. So, I mean, the newest evolution is with thermal cameras right now, because that way you don't have any images on or leaving the devices. So it becomes a lot more anonymous. So it's a lot easier to explain to the employees that you're actually just tracking the space usage and not the employees themselves. And you really need to do that to be able to adjust the workplace to the way the employees are using their space, because that's where the benefit to the employees is. The benefit to the employer is obviously the increased productivity and the space savings if you optimize your space correctly. So change management is a very big element of the technology. It's how do you explain to your employees that they're getting a big benefit out of it without any negative consequences, and at the same time then you as a company can reap the benefits. So I think there's a lot to it, and the technology has changed a lot and is continuously changing, but that is what is necessary to create a positive employee workplace experience. I know that here in the US, we're relatively open about what data can be collected and what type of technology we can use. Europe is a little bit different with the GDPR. Sam, what are your experiences with that?
Yeah, I think very similar, to be quite honest. There's obviously some nuances between the sort of privacy concerns and GDPR that we have in EMEA. But just to go back to the security concerns with the cameras, I think that is again, looking from an employee's perspective, that is an area of concern for some employees, and I think it's the first thing is to make sure that it's clear and communicated to employees and what's being, what technology has been delivered and why. We leverage thermal imaging, so it's completely private when it comes to understanding occupancy data for within a space. And I think as long as that's communicated to individuals within the building, it's there to add value and improve their experience within the building. The other area where I see a little bit of a difference is leveraging Bluetooth low energy technology. So if we're talking more to do with sort of more granular data on how people are using the building, i.e. we have smart badges, so we're able to see how visitors or individuals are moving around a space. There's only so much data we can take as far as who those individuals are, what departments they're from across Europe because of GDPR. However, those insights, are really critical when you're looking to redesign a space and change that physical workspace to a much more productive and collaborative environment. So it is really critical to see how a HR department perhaps is speaking with either a finance department or operations or IT or whatever, and you can use those insights not only from this hardware, from these devices, not only to then redesign what's the best space from concentration to collaboration, but also where do we want to locate individuals from each department. So yeah, there's a lot there, but when it comes to sort of the change management piece, I also think that is something that really needs to be focused on when adopting this type of technology. Integrating it into standard operating procedures within the business will ensure the best adoption of your employees, creating sort of training programs on how to use it, how to leverage it, and really extract the benefit from the technology. So yeah, I think that pretty much that covers most of the concerns, I guess, that we've spoken about so far. And the one challenge in which we haven't, I guess, spoke about necessarily in detail around employee experiences is that return on investment, especially when we're talking about employee experience, which I know that we're going to talk about further on.
Yes, so we see that there are clear benefits for different stakeholders, and so with the new technologies, there is also a risk of an investment. How do we ensure that the investment will actually come back? So, can you tell us how you can prove a positive ROI from digital building or occupant experience focused solutions?
Yeah, I think when it comes to employee experience return of investment, I think it's it's always very difficult to prove that from a dollars and cents perspective. There is ways to do it. For example, time saved. Everybody's paid a salary, everybody's paid a rate, or whatever it may be. So any time saved is increased time on task, or save time for the business, and that's going to differ on the different types of industries. For example, healthcare, time is absolutely critical. It's the difference between saving a life and losing a life. In the logistics industry, there is a time commitment that they make to their customers in order to meet their delivery times and so on. So it increases their customer retention and so on. And then within the office space, generally, if you're increasing the experience for the employees within the environment, you're making it more safer, you're creating a happier workplace. That's going to reduce absenteeism, which is obviously going to increase you're going to increase your staff retention, and essentially have better business continuity. Every time you replace an individual within your business, everybody knows it takes, if you've got somebody very good, it could take 4 weeks to ramp them up, but sometimes it can take up to 3 months. And that has quite a considerable impact to your business operations. So it's always good to look at it from that perspective. And also the other thing is look at the technology as what other value does it add? We're talking here that you deploy occupancy technology to be able to understand how space is being utilized, to integrate that with room booking systems, to know how the availability of rooms and so on. But actually this technology is going to give you lots of other data that you can leverage and actually create an ROI, i.e. is your building, is your real estate right-sized to how it's being utilized? And the savings that you can make through right-sizing your real estate are huge. We know that pre-pandemic, CBRE did a study, 41% of buildings were completely unused. So you can leverage that saving in order to deploy this employee experience technology. But Adrian, thoughts from your side?
When it comes to the ROI, I think what you said is entirely correct. The way I usually approach it is the easiest ROI is just the space savings that you get by right-sizing your office. And pre-COVID, we were talking, on average about a 30% reduction in footprint was normal for pretty much across all industries that you could achieve by switching from a static to an agile environment. And to give the audience a bit of an understanding of what that actually means, like in New York, the average cost of one workspace is around $20,000 to $22,000 a year. So if you just go through, in your head, kind of the size of your company, your building, how many employees you have, and then you think, okay, we could be reducing the workspaces by 30%, and that times that amount. Obviously, it's different depending on which real estate market you're in. Those are massive savings, and that really gives you the cash to work with to create a very good employee experience app, because the data that you're collecting to facilitate that switch is where the savings are, and that can be used then for other purposes. So, as Sam said, that's where you get your productivity savings. That's where you get the client retention and so on. So I think, it's a multi-step process, but the easiest one is to start with the concrete ROI, and the secondary ones you can measure once everything's in place.
Thank you, Adrian. So as we're approaching the end of the session, we'll take a couple of minutes for the Q&A. I think we're left with one question. So how do I start? And as a company that wants to improve occupant experience through digital building solutions, what should you do first? Adrian, can you comment on that?
Well, when you're trying to introduce human-centric solutions, the first step is to look at what am I trying to achieve? What are the goals? What is the current as is situation? And what is our kind of project framework? And there's a lot of different options there. So what time horizon are we looking at? Obviously in this field, you want to be collecting as much data as possible before you make decisions. You don't want to just randomly decide we're going to cut everything by 30% because that could have catastrophic consequences. You need to put sensing technology into the building to see how your employees are using space. You want to do that over a prolonged horizon because there's seasonal changes, there's changes based on external effects, and of course, when you have new employees that come in, they also change the way they work. So, if we use the recent example of KPMG, that they've made their decision, but they're not moving until 2025. So, I tend to say, a minimum of a year, ideally 2 years, is the amount of time that you want to be collecting data before you do a workplace transformation study to make those changes. And then you also need to look at what kind of technology are you going to be using for that. I mean, there's a lot of different solutions. There are excellent wired sensors. There's excellent battery-powered sensors. But ultimately, if you're going to be measuring how your employees use the space to make changes to optimize it, having a wired solution is not necessarily ideal because you're going to be making changes and then having to rewire everything makes things difficult. Having battery-powered solutions has the downside that, after a certain amount of time, you're going to go and replace the batteries. So, I would suggest looking for something that has a very, very high battery life because you don't want to go through a building and replace 5,000 sensors every year or every 2 years. And if it's every 3, 4, 5 years, that is a huge saving in terms of facility costs. So there's a lot of different things to look at. And again, every use case is slightly different. You can use the same technology that you're using to optimize space to have smart activity-based cleaning. So there's a lot of knock-on benefits that you have from that. And you want to have a scalable solution. So you don't want to have something that's just like Wi-Fi only, because if you have thousands of devices connecting to your Wi-Fi network, you're going to absolutely destroy your connectivity. And you need to look at how your IT department is set up. If they have Cisco or Juniper access points, whether the technology is plug and play. So, I guess to sum it all up, the best way to approach this is to go and talk to someone who knows the business, and they can give you a bunch of different solutions. And always bear in mind that there are a lot of different solutions, and again, a lot of use cases. So that would be my 2 cents.
And I think it's a practical step. What you can do, you can reach out to our 2 experts, depending on where you're located, to Sam or Adrian. We'll share the contact details and links with everyone to book meetings with our experts in a follow-up email.